correctly with the correct amount.
Are you hearing bumps in the night? Seeing mysterious lights in the sky? Are there mysterious red eyes watching you from the shadows? Did you find a strange, oversized footprint? Do you believe in cryptids and the paranormal? Are you afraid of the dark? No? Well, you should be. It's time for Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio, the bi-weekly podcast that is dedicated to bringing you the legends and stories of paranormal events that occurred in and around North and South Carolina. So pour yourself a drink, dim the lights, sit back, and enjoy the show. Welcome to the premiere episode of Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio. My name is Chris Edwards, and this is my co-host Jay Gallagher.
Hello, my fellow creepers.
In this edition, we will explore the legend of Lydia, the Jamestown Ghost. But before we dive right in, let's meet our host. So, Jay, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a retired firefighter paramedic. I'm your basic family man. And, my wife says I'm a grumpy old man, but I don't believe what she says half the time anyway. I live here in central North Carolina, and I've had a lot of different interests since I've retired from the fire department. And this is probably the biggest one. How about you, Chris? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like you, I'm a firefighter, EMT, and haven't gotten to paramedic yet, but I am a firefighter, EMT, living in the northern part of South Carolina, like right near Charlotte, North Carolina, is where I'm at, but you know that. And Jay, how did you become interested in paranormal phenomenon?
Well, somehow, shape, form, or fashion, I've always, except for one house, I've always lived in a haunted house. When I was little, we lived in a haunted house, and the woman that haunted it name was Miss Sally. And the quick ghost story, I guess you would say, about Miss Sally is she had her boyfriend went off to fight in the Civil War, and he didn't make it, unfortunately. He got killed, and she couldn't bear the thoughts of living without him, so she hung herself from the upstairs banister rail, upstairs. And we would hear footsteps at night, the typical boards creaking and whatnot, but the lights would either come on when you wasn't inspecting it. You could get up to go over to the switch to turn the lights out, and the switch would be in the off position. And you could say, "Miss Sally, would you please turn the lights out?" And the lights would go out. And the same thing in reverse. The lights would be on, and they would go out. "Miss Sally, would you please turn the lights back on?" And the lights would come on. It wasn't a 2 or 3 minute delay in between. It was immediate response when you ask her to either turn the lights back on or turn them off. She never done any harm to us. Just the footsteps and the lights. And once in a while, you would get the aroma of fresh baked bread, and nobody be in the kitchen doing anything, and nobody in my house except for my great grandma knew how to bake bread like that. And at that point, she was so far up in age that she couldn't do much in the kitchen,
Right.
Except stand back and supervise. And as I got older, we moved to Eli Whitney, which is a small community in the southern part of Alamance County. And almost immediately, we're hearing footsteps upstairs. No electrical phenomena, I guess you would say. And we found out that the woman that we bought the house from, her husband had passed away in the house.
Oh wow, you never told me that.
Yeah, he had a massive heart attack, from what I could gather, and he didn't make it. And two 2 years maybe after we moved into that house, my uncle passed away. Now myself and my dad, God rest his soul, very interested in the Civil War, and my dad had a whole bunch of relics and books and everything. He basically turned the upstairs of that house into a museum, as you well know. And not long after my uncle died, who was also interested in the Civil War, the footsteps upstairs increased. Instead of a, like once a month thing, it was every day. And it happened almost immediately after Uncle Keith passed away. So we contributed that to Uncle Keith's spirit being upstairs in what my dad called the Civil War room.
Right, and I remember one day I was visiting you, and y'all had gone to the store. I was sitting there by myself, and there was just this horrendous crash upstairs, and I knew nobody was home, and that was just like freaky.
Yeah, a lot of weird things took place after Uncle Keith passed away, and my uncle on my mama's side, who was living with us when he passed away, he was a musician. He played bluegrass music, and he played the banjo. Well, one of my granddads on my mom's side, one of his banjos was upstairs, and in the Civil War room also. And not long after he passed away, you could go up there, and you could just barely hear it, but it was like somebody over there plunking on that banjo. So we figured we contributed that to Uncle Larry. So
Right.
and basically having a whole lifetime of paranormal experiences is basically what really kicked my interest into high gear of it. And I've been kind of studying it and researching it and whatnot ever since.
Gotcha. So, as for me, my interest really peaked when I was in middle school and we took a trip to Gettysburg. I don't remember exactly what grade I was in, but there were all the stories of the ghost on the battlefield and different things that we saw when we were there. And that's where it kind of started. And then, like you, I've seen some strange things over the years. Different houses I've been into just had some really uneasy energy. My wife's parents' house in Burlington, the downstairs was like that for the longest time. You go down there and just get this really weird feeling of just like dread and just weird, really weak. When I'm sitting down there on the computer, I'd just feel really weak. I'd get up and go upstairs and it would be fine. And so, yeah, I've been exposed to some pretty strange things as well.
Yeah. Well, if you remember when we all went to Gettysburg last year, my youngest son, he was up there taking pictures and he called a few things on that we can't explain. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah, he had that app on his phone and he was playing around with it, and there was like a image sitting right beside him in the van.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, my fellow creepers and creepettes. The subject for tonight is the Jamestown Ghost, the ghost of Lydia. This happens in Guilford County, which is the next county over from where I live. And I've heard about this legend, ghost, whatever, for a long time. And Chris, you want to give us the background story on this?
Sure. Well, anyone who was raised in the Greensboro area in North Carolina in the 80s grew up knowing this legend. The legend of Lydia's Bridge is one of the most well-known ghost stories in the Piedmont Triad, a story that dates back to the early 1920s. Our story begins like this. A young man was driving down a winding road through Jamestown late at night. It is well after midnight on a foggy night, and his eyelids are growing heavier and heavier as he makes a trip back to High Point. Through the rainy mist, he just barely sees the ghostly white figure of a pale woman in a white dress, standing beneath a curved bridge and waving her long, thin arm in the air. He pulls over to give the mysterious hitchhiker a ride. He makes small talk with the woman, who answers his questions in solemn whispers and seems hauntingly sad. Her home is in High Point. When they arrive at her home, he gets out of the car to come around and open her door. But, to his surprise, when he gets home, the passenger side, she's gone. Assuming she had simply rushed into her home, he goes to knock on her door to make sure she got inside safely. Knock, knock. Instead of the ethereal Lydia, a very old woman answers the door. Confused, he asks if Lydia is inside. Lydia has been dead for years, says the old woman, her eyes filling with tears. She was my daughter, and it seems like she's still trying to come home. And Jay, tell us about the identity of Lydia.
Well, several years ago, a couple of paranormal investigators, Michael Reniger and Amy Greer, did a lot of research into the history behind the legend of Lydia, and they also have written a book called Looking for Lydia. They basically got a bunch of old newspaper clippings that led them all the way to the, believe it or not, the grave of Lydia herself. Now, the authors believe that her middle initial, or her whole name is Annie Lydia Jackson, and they found out that the L might have been where the name Lydia originated from. Now, a lady by the name of Robin Taylor, who has lived in Greensboro all of her life, is the great niece of Annie L. Jackson. Now, she grew up knowing that the legend of Lydia, but it wasn't until she began to work on her family tree that she made the connection that her great aunt Annie had died in a car crash. And she said, I'm going to quote what she said here. It says, quote, "I'm in the public library reading this, and I'm like going, oh my God, I think my aunt could be Lydia." And I thought, man, and I kept reading it, and I'm like, yeah, I think she's really could be my aunt. Now the Robin, the niece, had found a photo of Annie or Lydia, and found it in her family Bible, and she gave it to the paranormal investigators who wrote the book so they could put a face to the name. And so she reached out to them and give it to them. Now, Annie Jackson was born April 28th, 1885, which would have made her about 35 years old at the time of her death. She worked in a cigar factory and had been living in a nearby hotel while working, and had only been there a few months Her mom and dad also lived in the same area. Today, you can find her grave at Holt's Chapel Cemetery in Greensboro. Now, the location, if you want to go to Lydia's Bridge and check it out, if you're into doing paranormal investigations, it's on US 70A, or the old High Point Road, just south of Jamestown. If you're going up 85 south, you go Highway 70 to exit 118, which is also Business 70. Then after you go there, you take the first exit you come to for Jamestown and / Sedgefield. and turn right at the top of the exit onto Vickery Chapel Road. You go about a half a mile to the traffic light where Vickery Chapel Road veers off to the left. Take that left, go another mile, and you'll come to High Point Road. Take a left onto High Point Road. The road curves around and goes under a railway underpass near the Welcome to Jamestown sign. There's a U-turn, or a turn, not a U-turn, I'm sorry. There's a parking spot right there on your right where you can park. And Lydia's Bridge is the old underpass there on the right, just through a small clump of trees. Now, the bridge itself was built in 1916. That's just a few years before Annie's died in the car wreck in 1920. What was the date we found on the crash?
April 28th, I think, or something like that.
April 28th, 1920. Now, according to DOT officials, the original Lydia's Bridge was abandoned for decades.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was June 20th. I was wrong.
20th. Okay, June 20th, 1920. Okay, now, according to DOT officials, the original Lydia's Bridge was abandoned for decades after a new bridge was created around 100 meters away. The overgrowth and curtains of ivy almost completely obscured the bridge where Annie Jackson died so many years ago, giving it a permanently eerie and mysterious vibe that made it perfect for urban legends.
Yeah, and from what I understand, they made a footpath that walks underneath the old bridge now, like a walking track, from what I was reading.
I would like to go check it out myself.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point earlier. It was like, do you have to be a rainy night to see the ghost, or what? And from one other story that I was reading, I noticed that they said that Amy Greer had stated that they think that a lot of the activity is gone or died down since her identity has been revealed. Like, she was trying to get people to know who she was and is kind of moving on now, but I'm not 100% sure of when the actual last sighting was.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, the last reported sighting, how many people seen it since then and didn't say anything to anybody because they didn't want them to think they were crazy?
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, we were kind of discussing it earlier. The Bible itself speaks of what's the wording? Unfriendly spirits, I believe it was.
Right.
So if the Bible says that they're real, then why should we not doubt it? Because the Bible's not going to lie to us.
Right.
So, and here's something else that I just wondered. All the reports of the sightings have been by young men.
Right.
I haven't seen one where a young lady has had an encounter. So I wonder if it's just strictly guys that see her and try to help her, or if it's been for women, also picking her up and they just not say anything. So,
well, I'm wondering if the sightings have died down because that bridge has been decommissioned and there's no traffic going through that bridge now. It's out, like it said, it's kind of covered over with ivy and you can't really see much down there anymore.
Yeah. Now, you know how sometimes when they talk about, spirits coming back, I guess you would say, like for instance, in a house, like they do some remodeling and the spirits come back. I wonder if you was to go back in there and clean the ivy up and put the bridge back into commission, if the sightings would pick back up.
I don't know. It'd be almost a shame to disturb her.
True. Very true. So especially if she's found peace and, lack of better words, crossed over.
Right. Right. So here we need to actually list our references. The research material that was gathered for this show was from articles posted on the following web sources: from the Fox 8 WGHP News website, the WRAL TV News website, from NorthCarolinaGhost.com, and from WFMY News 2 website. So, Jay, what are your final thoughts on this week's episode?
I definitely want to go to Jamestown and check it out. Whether we get a paranormal experience or not, I don't know, but that's the thing, you don't never know until you go and check it out. And that's definitely something I want to do. It's not too far from here, and it's doable. How about you? What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. It would be fun to see. I grew up in the Greensboro area, so I've been down there like 3 or 4 times over the years when I was a teenager, and at the time I didn't see anything down there. But not to say that you won't see anything there. So yeah, it's a good day trip and be fun to go do.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that's it for this episode. I'll leave y'all with a word that my granddaddy used to say. There's nothing there in the dark that wasn't there in the daylight. But what's there in the daylight? Till next episode, I'm Jay Gallagher.
And I'm Chris Edwards.
Take care.
Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. And don't forget to tune in to our next episode of Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio, where we will discuss the Ghost Hound of Goshen. I thank you again for listening to the show. Special thanks to our research assistant, Chris Coburn, without whose help we couldn't have made the show. You've been listening to Carolina Creepers and Oddities Radio. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. If you like our show, please help us out by providing a review. If you would like to contact us, please email us at firefighter274@outlook.com. Until next time, remember, fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. If you stare at the dark too long, you will eventually see what isn't there.